I'm Morgan, 28 years old, standing in a corner at my sister Amber's extravagant wedding reception. Despite my successful marketing career, I've always been the family disappointment. The champagne flute trembles in my hand as my mother Eleanor's voice cuts through the crowd. At least she wasn't a failure like you. Even your birth ruined my life. My brother Thomas laughs loudly alongside her. Something inside me finally breaks. I place my glass down carefully, turn around, and walk straight out the door. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. Like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would. Growing up in our upscale Boston suburb, appearances always mattered more than feelings. Our colonial-style house, with its manicured lawn, was the perfect backdrop for my mother Eleanor's carefully curated life. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect family, successful father, elegant mother, and 3 well-behaved children. But behind closed doors, the reality was starkly different. My mother was the ultimate perfectionist. Her standards weren't just high, they were impossibly, deliberately unattainable, at least for me. My sister Amber, 2 years younger, somehow always managed to meet them. She was the golden child from day one. Her ballet recitals were masterpieces, her school projects award-winning. Her friends perfectly selected from the right families. Even when she made mistakes, they were quickly forgiven or overlooked entirely. Amber has such natural grace, my mother would say, while in the same breath adding, "Morgan, must you slouch like that? Stand up straight for once." Then there was my brother Thomas, for years younger than me. He quickly learned that aligning himself with our mother was the path of least resistance. He became her loyal enforcer, echoing her criticisms and adding his own cutting remarks to curry favor. When I'd come home with an A, while Amber had an A, Thomas would be the first to say, "Almost good enough, but not quite." Typical Morgan. My father Robert existed on the periphery of our family dynamic. A corporate attorney who worked 60-hour weeks, he was physically absent for most of my childhood. When he was home, he retreated behind newspapers or locked himself in his study. The few times I approached him about my mother's treatment, his response was always the same. "Your mother just wants what's best for you. Try harder to make her happy." By the time I turned 15, he'd moved out entirely, finalizing the divorce a year later. The pattern of favoritism was established early. When I was 7, I won a spelling bee at school. Coming home with my certificate, I found my mother fawning over Amber's artwork, which had been selected for a school hallway display. When I tried to show my achievement, my mother glanced at it dismissively. "That's nice, Morgan, but proper spelling is expected. Not exceptional. Now look at your sister's creativity." My academic achievements were consistently downplayed. When I was accepted into all my college choices, including an Ivy League school, my mother's response was, "Well, they've been lowering their standards recently." Meanwhile, Amber's acceptance into a state school with a partial scholarship prompted a celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant. The truth about my birth came out during a medical appointment when I was 13. The doctor asked about family health history, and my mother sighed dramatically before explaining I was an unplanned pregnancy that derailed her career in interior design. She spoke as if I weren't sitting right there, listening to every word. I had to cancel a major client project when the morning sickness got too severe. By the time I was ready to return, someone else had taken my position. The doctor looked uncomfortable, but my mother continued, "We made it work, of course, but things would have been very different." From that day forward, whenever I disappointed her, she'd make reference to sacrifices she'd made because of my existence. "I gave up everything for this family," she'd say, looking directly at me, "and this is the thanks I get." I tried everything to win her approval. I joined every club, maintained perfect grades, kept my room immaculate, helped with dinner without being asked. Nothing worked. When I cooked, I used too many spices. When I cleaned, I missed spots. When I succeeded, it was luck or teachers feeling sorry for me. The day I turned 18, I moved into my college dorm and felt like I could breathe for the first time. Unlike Amber and Thomas, who received generous allowances and fully paid tuition, I cobbled together scholarships, loans, and worked 20 hours a week at the campus coffee shop. My mother explained the discrepancy by saying, "You need to learn responsibility, Morgan. It builds character. Your siblings are more sensitive." While they drove cars my parents purchased, I took the bus. While they enjoyed spring breaks in Cancun, I picked up extra shifts. When they graduated with no debt, I emerged with loans that would take a decade to pay off. But I also graduated with something they didn't have: complete financial independence and a job offer at a small marketing firm that I'd secured through my own network and hard work. The day I signed my first apartment lease, I called my mother, foolishly hoping for some acknowledgement of my achievement. "It's in such an unsafe neighborhood," she said after looking up the address. "Couldn't you have tried harder to find something better? Amber's condo has a doorman and a pool. Amber's condo is partially paid for by you and Dad." I reminded her. "Well, we invest in things that have potential to appreciate in value," she replied without a moment's hesitation. That was the last time I shared any accomplishment with her directly. From then on, she learned about my promotions and successes through family gossip, and I learned to stop expecting the approval that would never come. The embossed wedding invitation arrived 6 months before the big day. Amber was marrying James Huntington, whose family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across New England. The envelope contained not just the invitation, but a handwritten note from Amber asking me to be a bridesmaid. Despite our complicated relationship, a small part of me felt honored and hopeful. Maybe this could be a turning point for our family. That hope evaporated during our first shopping trip for bridesmaid dresses. My mother insisted on coming along, claiming Amber needed someone with taste to help make decisions. As I emerged from the dressing room in the third option, a floor-length emerald silk that actually complemented my figure, my mother made a show of scrutinizing me from every angle. "The color washes you out completely," she declared. "And it's quite snug around your hips, isn't it? Have you been keeping up with your gym membership?" The bridal consultant, sensing tension, suggested a different style, but my mother kept going. Amber was always the one with the model figure. Even after college, she maintained her discipline with diet and exercise. Later that day, Amber called to inform me she'd changed the wedding colors entirely. "The bridesmaids will be wearing blush pink now, not green. I hope you haven't purchased anything yet." I had, of course. The emerald dress had been bought and paid for on my mother's insistence that we can't risk the good ones being sold out. When I mentioned this to Amber, she sighed dramatically. "Morgan, why would you buy something without double-checking with me? This is exactly why I was hesitant to ask you to be in the wedding party. You always make things more complicated." The months leading up to the wedding became increasingly stressful. 2 weeks after the dress incident, I received a significant promotion at work, becoming the youngest senior marketing strategist in my company's history. When I mentioned it during a family dinner dedicated to discussing wedding centerpieces, my mother rolled her eyes. "Marketing is just glorified advertising, isn't it? Trying to trick people into buying things they don't need." She immediately pivoted back to the wedding. "Now, Amber, about the crystal options for the head table." The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive country club with panoramic views of the Boston skyline. It was the first time our entire family had been together in one room since my father's remarriage 3 years earlier. He arrived with his new wife, Diane, a soft-spoken librarian who seemed perpetually anxious around my mother. "Robert, you're looking tired," my mother greeted him. "I hope Diane is taking good care of you." The emphasis made it clear she doubted this was the case. As we took our seats, I found myself placed next to Daniel, my ex-boyfriend from college who was now, inexplicably, good friends with my brother Thomas. Morgan, wow, it's been what, 5 years? Daniel said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. We had dated for most of college until he'd cheated with a sorority girl. Now he was apparently a frequent golf partner of Thomas's. 6, I corrected, reaching for my wine glass. Thomas didn't mention you were invited. Last-minute addition to even out the tables, Thomas explained, appearing behind me. Mom thought it would be nice for you to have someone to talk to since you didn't bring a date. His smirk told me this was deliberate, a reminder of my single status amid this celebration of marriage. Throughout dinner, my mother made several passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. When Aunt Patricia asked about my job, my mother intercepted. Morgan's still finding her way. Not everyone can be as decisive as Amber, who knew exactly what she wanted in her career and relationship. The fact that Amber had never actually held a job since graduating, instead focusing on planning her wedding to James, went unmentioned. During a brief moment alone at the bar, I overheard my mother talking to relatives in the corner. Amber has always been our joy. She just lights up a room, doesn't she? Morgan is more, well, she's very independent. Does everything her own way, even when advised otherwise. My best friend Rachel, who I'd known since college and who understood my family dynamic better than anyone, texted me throughout the evening with encouraging messages. Remember, your worth isn't determined by them. Her last text read, call me if you need an escape plan. The night before the wedding, after the rehearsal dinner, I found myself alone on the balcony of my hotel room, staring at the city lights. Despite everything, a small, stubborn part of me still hoped that the wedding might somehow bring healing. That my mother might, just once, look at me with the same pride she showed when looking at Amber. That Thomas might act like a brother instead of a competitor. That my father might finally stand up for me. Tomorrow will be different, I told myself, watching planes blink across the night sky. I'll support Amber on her big day. I'll be gracious and positive. I'll rise above it all. I spent an hour that night perfecting my bridesmaid speech, carefully crafting words of love and support for my sister, determined to be the bigger person despite years of being made to feel small. The morning of Amber's wedding dawned clear and perfect, as if even the weather bent to my sister's will. I arrived early at the venue, a historic mansion with sprawling gardens, ready to help with final preparations. Despite being a bridesmaid, I quickly realized I was an afterthought in the carefully orchestrated day. Morgan, there you are, my mother said when I entered the bridal suite. The florist delivered the wrong shade of roses. Go sort it out, will you? Amber's having her makeup done and can't be disturbed. While the other bridesmaids, mostly Amber's sorority sisters, sipped champagne and took selfies, I spent an hour negotiating with the florist over barely perceptible differences in pink hues. By the time I returned, successful in my mission, the professional photographers had arrived and were capturing getting ready moments. We need the bride's family, the photographer announced, gesturing for my mother to join Amber. You too, I suppose, my mother added as an afterthought, reluctantly waving me into the frame. But as I moved forward, she subtly shifted her body, partially blocking me from the camera's view. In the resulting photos, I would later discover I was barely visible, just a sliver of blush pink silk at the edge of the perfect family portrait. Throughout the morning, I kept my promise to myself, maintaining a positive attitude despite being relegated to handling problems rather than participating in celebrations. I helped bustle Amber's elaborate gown, fetched water when she complained of thirst, and reapplied her lipstick after she kissed our tearful mother during a spontaneous moment that the photographer captured from 3 different angles. As the ceremony time approached, my anxiety about giving my speech intensified. I'd rehearsed it countless times, but public speaking had always terrified me, especially knowing my mother would be scrutinizing every word and gesture. I took a moment alone in a quiet hallway, breathing deeply and reviewing my note cards one last time. The ceremony itself was picture perfect. Amber glided down the aisle on our father's arm, looking every bit the princess bride in her designer gown. James teared up as she approached, and even I felt a lump in my throat watching my little sister on her big day. For a brief moment, family tensions faded into the background as we witnessed their exchange of vows against a backdrop of cascading flowers and twinkling lights. After the ceremony, cocktail hour passed in a blur of polite small talk with distant relatives and friends of my parents who remembered me as a child but knew nothing of my adult life. "You work in advertising. Is that right?" my father's college roommate asked. "Marketing strategy, actually," I corrected gently. "I recently became the senior strategist at my firm." "How nice," he replied vaguely before brightening as he spotted someone over my shoulder. "Is that Thomas?" "My goodness, I heard he just made partner at his law firm." "Excuse me, I must congratulate him." The reception began with a grand entrance, multi-course dinner, and then the moment I'd been dreading, the toasts. The best man went first with a predictably humorous speech about James's college antics, followed by my father, who spoke briefly but warmly about welcoming James to the family. Then it was my mother's turn. She stood gracefully, champagne flute in hand, commanding the room's attention without effort. "When Amber was born," she began, "I knew immediately she was special. She had a spark, a brightness that everyone could see." My mother's eyes glistened with tears. "Throughout her life, she has exceeded every expectation, bringing nothing but joy and pride to our family." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, already sensing where this was headed. Amber always knew what she wanted and went after it with determination. Whether it was ballet lessons, the lead in the school play, or catching the eye of the wonderful man she married today, Amber has approached life with purpose and grace. The crowd nodded appreciatively. James squeezed Amber's hand. "Not everyone is born knowing their path," my mother continued, her gaze drifting meaningfully in my direction. "Some people struggle to find their way, make questionable decisions, need more guidance." A subtle tension crept into the room. Guests glanced at each other, uncertain where this was going. "But not our Amber," my mother said, raising her glass higher. "At least she wasn't a failure like you, Morgan," she added, the words seemingly slipping out before she could stop them. But instead of looking embarrassed by her faux pas, she doubled down. "Even your birth ruined my life. Amber was planned, wanted. My perfect child." A shocked silence fell over the reception. I sat frozen, blood rushing in my ears, unable to believe she had finally said aloud what had been implied my entire life. Then Thomas laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that broke the silence. "Come on, sis, you know it's true," he added, apparently thinking his input would somehow lighten the moment. "You've always been the family disappointment." Guests stared at their plates. The wedding coordinator whispered urgently to the DJ. Amber's new husband looked mortified. While Amber herself didn't defend me, she just looked embarrassed that her perfect wedding now had an uncomfortable moment. In that crystalline second, I saw with perfect clarity what had taken me 28 years to understand. Nothing would ever change. No achievement would ever be enough. No effort would ever be recognized, no matter what I did. In my mother's eyes, my very existence was a failure. I placed my napkin carefully on the table, stood up, and walked out without a word. No dramatic scene, no tearful confrontation. I simply left, feeling strangely calm as I handed my valet ticket to the attendant and waited for my car under the starlit sky. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running away from my family. I was walking toward myself. The drive away from the wedding venue felt surreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly as tears blurred the road ahead. I pulled over twice to collect myself, gulping in the cool night air that smelled of early autumn. Each breath felt like my first taste of oxygen after years of slowly drowning. As I drove, memories flooded back, not just from the wedding, but from a lifetime of moments when I'd been made to feel less than. My 10th birthday, when my mother had criticized the way I blew out my candles. My high school graduation, when Thomas had loudly wondered how much the school had lowered their standards. College move-in day. When my parents had dropped me off first so they could spend quality time helping Amber settle into her dorm. I checked into a hotel 30 miles from the venue. A modest place, nothing like the luxury accommodations where the wedding guests were staying. The desk clerk glanced curiously at my bridesmaid dress, but said nothing as she handed me the key card. In my room, I kicked off my painful heels and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the generic landscape painting on the wall without really seeing it. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I left, but I'd ignored it. Now, I finally looked at the screen. The first message was from Rachel. "Are you okay? Call me. I can come get you anywhere. Anytime. You don't have to face them alone." Her words triggered the first genuine smile I'd experienced all day. Rachel had been my roommate sophomore year of college and had witnessed firsthand my family's treatment during Parents' Weekend. She'd been the first person to plainly state what I'd always suspected. "Your mother is emotionally abusive, Morgan. This isn't normal." The rest of the messages were less supportive. Thomas had sent 3 texts in quick succession. "Way to make a scene. Real mature. Mom's upset now. Hope you're proud of yourself. You ruined Amber's special day. As usual, you made everything about you." My father, surprisingly, had called twice but left no messages. Amber had texted once, "I can't believe you would walk out during my wedding. We'll discuss this when we return from our honeymoon." My mother had left a voicemail. I put the phone on speaker and placed it on the bed beside me, as if even holding it while hearing her voice was too much contact. "Morgan Elizabeth Davis." Her voice was tight with controlled fury. "Your behavior tonight was inexcusable. You embarrassed this entire family in front of everyone who matters. I expect you to return to the reception immediately, apologize publicly for your dramatic exit, and explain that you were feeling unwell. Call me back this instant." I deleted the message, then did something I'd never done before. I blocked her number, then Thomas's, then Amber's. The relief was immediate and physical, like setting down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for miles. That night, I called Rachel and sobbed through the whole story. Unlike my family, she listened without interruption, without judgment, without making it about herself. "You know this is the healthiest thing you've ever done, right?" she said when I'd finished. "Walking away from people who hurt you isn't weakness. It's self-preservation." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and did something impulsive, but somehow perfectly right. I applied for a marketing position I'd been eyeing in Chicago, 3 states and almost 1,000 miles away from Boston and my family. The job represented a significant step up in my career. And I'd been hesitant to apply, hearing my mother's voice in my head. "You're not qualified. You're reaching too high. You'll embarrass yourself." Now, I completed the application with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. Then I wrote a brief, professional email to my current boss explaining a family emergency had arisen and I'd need to take my accumulated vacation days starting immediately. Around 3 in the morning, my phone rang again. It wasn't a blocked number, but it was a Boston area code. Warily, I answered. "Morgan." It was my father. "Are you safe? Just tell me that." "I'm safe," I replied, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I'm at a hotel." "Good. That's good." He paused. "What your mother said was wrong." I should have stepped in. "Yes, you should have," I agreed. Too exhausted for politeness. "Just like you should have stepped in the 1,000 other times before this." He was quiet for so long I thought he might have hung up. "You're right," he finally said. "I failed you, Morgan. I'm sorry." The apology, decades overdue and still inadequate, nonetheless loosened something tight in my chest. "I have to go," I said, unwilling to absolve him so easily. "I understand. Just take care of yourself." I'm finally going to, I told him, and ended the call. Early the next morning, I drove to my parents' house, knowing everyone would still be at post-wedding brunches and activities. Using my rarely used key, I quickly packed essential belongings, important documents, irreplaceable photos, favorite books, and enough clothes to get by until I could arrange for the rest. I left my key on the kitchen counter with a brief note, "I'll be in touch about collecting my remaining things." As I was loading the last box into my car, a vehicle pulled into the driveway. My stomach dropped until I recognized my father's car. He got out slowly, looking like he hadn't slept. "I thought you might come by," he said, keeping his distance as if afraid I'd flee. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here." I closed my trunk, suddenly exhausted beyond words. "I don't want to fight. I'm just getting my things." "I know." He ran a hand through his silver hair. "Morgan, I want to help. Whatever you need. Money, references for jobs, anything." I looked at him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time in years. He'd aged considerably since the divorce, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. I realized with startling clarity that he was afraid, not just of my mother, but of losing me completely. "I need time," I said finally. "I need space to figure out who I am without constantly trying to be good enough for people who will never think I am." He nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I understand. But when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." I got into my car without promising anything. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of him in my rearview mirror. A solitary figure standing in the driveway of the house where I'd grown up but never belonged. The next morning dawned with unexpected clarity. I woke in my hotel room feeling lighter despite the uncertainty of my situation. After showering and changing into jeans and a sweater from my hastily packed belongings, I set up my laptop for the video interview I'd scheduled with the Chicago marketing firm. I was surprised to find I wasn't nervous, perhaps because after facing my mother's public humiliation, a job interview seemed manageable by comparison. Meanwhile, across town in her elegant breakfast nook, my mother was having a very different morning. I wouldn't learn the details until much later, but I could piece together what happened based on various accounts. Eleanor Davis was enjoying her post-wedding breakfast, already planning how she would describe the perfect event to her friends at the country club, conveniently editing out my departure and focusing instead on Amber's radiance and James's family connections. The crystal stemware and fine china were laid out just so, because even a private breakfast required proper presentation in Eleanor's world. When her phone rang displaying her brother Harold's number, she answered with practiced pleasantness. "Harold. Darling, calling to congratulate us on the beautiful wedding." What followed was apparently the first time anyone in the family had spoken to Eleanor with complete, unvarnished honesty about her behavior. Uncle Harold, my mother's older brother who had always kept a polite distance from family drama, had been seated at a table with perfect visibility of the head table during the reception. He had witnessed not only my mother's cruel words, but also the shocked reactions of everyone present. "What the hell is wrong with you, Eleanor?" he began without preamble. "I've watched you mistreat that girl for years, but last night crossed every line of decency." My mother, according to later reports from my cousin Lauren, who overheard her father's side of the call, attempted to interrupt with justifications, but Harold continued relentlessly. "No. You will listen for once in your life. Morgan has done nothing but try to earn your approval, and you've made it your mission to withhold it. She's built a successful career completely on her own, while you've handed everything to your other children. And to publicly humiliate her at her sister's wedding? To say her birth ruined your life? What kind of mother says that to her child?" By this point, my mother's face had reportedly turned white, her hand clutching the phone so tightly her knuckles matched her complexion. She was unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by family members who had historically enabled her behavior through their silence. "The family has been talking all night," Harold continued. Not about Amber's perfect wedding, but about your disgusting behavior. Diane and I have decided we won't be attending any family event where you're present until you make this right with Morgan. And I've already spoken with Robert and Patricia who feel the same way. While this confrontation was occurring, I was unaware of the brewing family storm. I sat in my hotel room, hair still damp from the shower, answering questions about marketing strategies and digital analytics from the Chicago hiring team. The interview went surprisingly well. My newfound determination apparently translating as confidence through the screen. Your portfolio is impressive, Ms. Davis, the marketing director, Michael Reyes, remarked. And your ideas for our Midwestern expansion are exactly the fresh perspective we've been looking for. When would you be available to start if offered the position? Immediately. I replied without hesitation. I'm actually looking to relocate as soon as possible. After the interview, a knock at my hotel room door revealed Rachel, holding coffee and a bag of pastries. Reinforcements have arrived, she announced, giving me a fierce hug. I've taken the day off work. We're going to figure this out together. As we spread out on the hotel bed with our impromptu breakfast, mapping out next steps on my laptop, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail. But something compelled me to answer. Morgan? It's Lauren, Uncle Harold's daughter. Lauren and I had never been close. She was several years younger and had always been more connected to Amber than to me. I couldn't imagine why she was calling now. I thought you should know what's happening. She continued without waiting for my response. Mom and Dad are furious about what happened at the wedding. Dad called Aunt Eleanor this morning and basically read her the riot act. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, putting the call on speaker so Rachel could hear. What do you mean? I asked. He told her he was disgusted by how she treated you. That the entire family was talking about it. That he and Mom won't attend any family events where she's present until she makes things right with you. Lauren paused. Morgan. I never realized how bad it was. I'm so sorry I didn't see it before. A strange warmth spread through my chest. Not quite happiness, but perhaps validation. For the first time, other people had witnessed what I'd experienced my entire life and were calling it what it was, wrong. Aunt Eleanor's freaking out. Lauren continued. Uncle Thomas has been calling everyone trying to do damage control, claiming you've always been emotionally unstable and attention-seeking. But no one's buying it, not after what they saw. After hanging up with Lauren, Rachel and I sat in stunned silence for a moment. So your family is finally seeing the truth, Rachel said eventually. How does that feel? I considered the question carefully. Validating, I admitted. But also irrelevant. I'm done basing my worth on their approval, even when they're on my side. That afternoon, I received an email from Michael Reyes offering me the position in Chicago at a salary 20% higher than my current one, with relocation assistance included. I accepted immediately, feeling the pieces of my new life falling into place with surprising speed. My phone continued to light up with messages throughout the day, extended family members expressing support, wedding guests who'd witnessed the incident checking on my well-being, even a few of Amber's bridesmaids who'd apparently been uncomfortable with how I'd been treated throughout the wedding preparations. The most surprising message came from my cousin Mark, Uncle Harold's son, who had always been close with Thomas. For what it's worth, he wrote, I confronted Thomas about laughing when your mom said that stuff. He tried to play it off like a joke. But I didn't let him. Told him it was cruel and I'd lost respect for him. He actually seemed shaken up. Maybe he's finally realizing actions have consequences. I showed the message to Rachel. Family accountability, she said, nodding approvingly. Better late than never. Too little, too late. I replied, but without bitterness. I was already looking forward, not back. 3 months after walking out of my sister's wedding, I stood at the window of my Chicago apartment, watching snow drift lazily down onto the city streets. My new home was smaller than my Boston apartment, but felt infinitely more spacious, without the weight of family expectations filling every corner. The transition had been surprisingly smooth. My new position as senior marketing strategist at Lakefront Partners challenged me professionally in ways my previous job never had. My boss, Michael, valued my input and regularly implemented my ideas without questioning my capabilities. The first time he praised my work in front of the entire team, I'd nearly cried from the shock of such public acknowledgement. The Montgomery campaign numbers just came in, he announced during that meeting. Morgan's strategy increased engagement by 42% and conversions by 27%. This is exactly why we brought her on board, people. Innovative thinking that delivers results. I'd built a small but meaningful social circle, primarily through Jessica, a graphic designer at the firm who had taken it upon herself to show me around Chicago. She introduced me to her friends at trivia nights and weekend brunches, people who knew me only as I was now, not as the perpetual disappointment I'd been cast as in my family narrative. "You seem different lately," Jessica remarked one evening as we worked late on a presentation. "More confident." "Different how?" I asked, curious about how I appeared to someone who had never known the old Morgan. "When you first started, you apologized for everything. Your ideas, your space in the conference room. Even your coffee order." She smiled. "Now you just exist. Take up space. It's good." Back in Boston, the family I'd left behind was experiencing their own transitions, though hardly as positive as mine. Through occasional texts with my father and updates from more distant relatives, I pieced together the aftermath of what was now referred to in hushed tones as the wedding incident. Thomas had lost his job at the prestigious law firm where he'd been working toward partner. According to my father, Thomas had become so preoccupied with the family drama and damage control that he'd missed crucial meetings and failed to complete assignments for important clients. When confronted by senior partners, he'd apparently had a meltdown, blaming family distractions and, indirectly, me. "He's moving back home temporarily," my father informed me during one of our brief, still awkward phone conversations. "Your mother is, well, she's delighted to have him back under her wing." Amber had returned from her honeymoon to find the family in disarray. The perfect wedding she'd envisioned was now remembered primarily for its dramatic conclusion rather than its meticulous details. According to Lauren, who had surprisingly become something of an ally and occasional information source, Amber had initially been furious with me for stealing her thunder. But as weeks passed and more family members questioned our mother's behavior, cracks had begun to appear in Amber's certainty. "She asked me if Mom had always been that way with you," Lauren reported. "I think she's starting to see things differently." My mother's attempts to contact me had evolved through predictable stages, imperious demands for my return, guilt-laden reminders of all she'd sacrificed for me, angry accusations about the family turmoil I'd caused, and finally, tearful pleas that stopped just short of actual apologies. I maintained my boundary, responding only to practical matters regarding my remaining possessions in Boston. The holiday season brought new challenges. Thanksgiving would be the first major family gathering since the wedding, and the invitation from my mother arrived via email with stiff formality. "Your presence is requested at the annual Davis family Thanksgiving dinner." I declined politely but firmly. "Thank you for the invitation, but I've made other plans in Chicago." Those plans included volunteering at a community dinner for those without family nearby, followed by a Friendsgiving at Jessica's apartment. When I mentioned this to my therapist, Dr. Winters, a calm, insightful woman who had been helping me untangle the complex web of my family relationships, she smiled approvingly. "You're building what we call chosen family," she said. "People who value you for exactly who you are, not who they want you to be." Therapy had been another positive change in my new life. Weekly sessions with Dr. Winters helped me recognize patterns I hadn't been able to see while still enmeshed in the family dynamic, how I'd internalized my mother's critical voice, How I'd been conditioned to believe I needed to earn love through achievement, how I'd accepted treatment I would never tolerate from anyone else. The interesting thing about family trauma, Dr. Winters observed during one session, is that often when one person begins to heal and set boundaries, it forces everyone else to confront their own roles in the dysfunctional system. Some rise to the challenge. Others double down on denial. This insight proved prophetic when, a week before Christmas, I received an unexpected email from Amber. Unlike my mother's communications, which remained focused on her feelings and experiences, Amber's message contained something I'd never seen from her before: curiosity about my perspective. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the wedding," she wrote, "and about our childhood. James pointed out that Mom always treated us very differently. And I guess I never questioned why. Would you be willing to talk about it sometime? No pressure, I just want to understand better." I read the email several times, uncertain how to respond. Part of me feared it was a trap, a way to pull me back into the family drama just as I was establishing my independence. But another part recognized the genuine confusion in her words. The first acknowledgement that perhaps our family hadn't been as perfect as she'd been taught to believe. After consulting with Dr. Winters, I replied cautiously, "I appreciate you reaching out. Amber, I'd be open to talking when I'm ready, but I need more time. I'm glad you're asking these questions." The holidays passed peacefully in my new city. I sent modest, thoughtful gifts to my father, Lauren, Uncle Harold, and Aunt Patricia. Nothing to my mother or Thomas, and a small gift card to Amber with a simple "Merry Christmas" message. I received an expensive but impersonal gift from my mother, forwarded through my father, monogrammed towels from Thomas that were clearly selected by his assistant, and a surprisingly thoughtful book on Chicago architecture from Amber with a note that simply read, "When you're ready, I'll listen." As winter deepened in Chicago, I found myself growing stronger in unexpected ways. I joined a kickboxing class, discovering a physical outlet for years of suppressed anger. I volunteered at a literacy program, reading to children whose faces lit up when they saw me arrive. I dated casually, learning to recognize red flags in potential partners who resembled my family dynamics. One snowy evening in late January, Jessica convinced me to attend a photography exhibit opening at a small gallery. The artist is a friend of my brother's, she explained as we sipped complimentary wine and studied black and white portraits of everyday Chicagoans. "He captures something real in people." The photographer, David, turned out to be as thoughtful as his work, asking questions and actually listening to the answers. When he asked about my family and I gave my standard vague response about complicated relationships, he didn't push for details. "Families are complex ecosystems," he said instead. "Sometimes the healthiest thing is to transplant yourself somewhere you can actually grow." I found myself smiling at the analogy. That's exactly what I did. By the time winter began melting into spring, I realized something profound had changed within me. The constant need for validation, the reflexive apologies, the assumption that I was somehow fundamentally flawed, these had begun to fade like old bruises finally healing. In their place grew something new and unfamiliar: self-trust. One year after I walked out of my sister's wedding, I stood in my Chicago apartment preparing for a visitor I never expected to host. Amber had texted 3 weeks earlier asking if she could come see me, alone, without telling our mother. After careful consideration and another session with Dr. Winters, I had agreed. The past year had transformed my life in ways both obvious and subtle. Professionally, I had exceeded even my own expectations, bringing in 2 major clients to lakefront partners and earning a substantial bonus. My apartment now felt truly mine, decorated with art I loved rather than pieces chosen to impress others. I had friends who knew the real me, not the version of myself I'd been conditioned to present. Most importantly, I had developed a relationship with myself based on acceptance rather than constant criticism. The doorbell rang promptly at 11, exactly when Amber had said she would arrive. Some things never changed. Her punctuality had always been impeccable, one of the many traits our mother had praised in her while finding fault with my similar efforts. "Hi," she said when I opened the door, looking both familiar and strangely different. Her hair was shorter now, her designer outfit replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. The perfectly manicured nails I remembered from the wedding were now short and practical. "Thank you for seeing me." We sat in my living room with coffee, the initial awkwardness gradually giving way to cautious conversation. "Your place is lovely," she offered, glancing around. "It feels like you." "Thanks," I replied, unsure what she meant. "How's James?" A shadow crossed her face. "We're working through some things. That's partly why I wanted to talk to you, actually." Over the next hour, Amber revealed what had been happening in her life since I left. At first, she had been angry with me for ruining her wedding, fully buying into our mother's version of events. But as the months passed, she began noticing patterns in her own marriage that disturbed her. "James started criticizing everything I did," she explained, staring into her coffee cup. "My cooking, my clothes, how I arranged the flowers in our home. Nothing was ever good enough." She looked up at me, realization in her eyes. "Just like Mom with you. The difference is you recognized it," I said gently. Amber nodded, tears welling. "I started therapy. James didn't want me to go, said it was unnecessary, but I insisted. And my therapist helped me see that what I thought was normal family dynamics wasn't. Morgan, I'm so sorry I never saw what was happening to you. I was so wrapped up in being the good daughter that I couldn't acknowledge how unfairly you were treated." Her apology, sincere and unprompted, loosened something tight in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. That would take time, but the possibility of it. "Mom's been controlling my entire life," Amber continued. "My friends, my education. Even James. Did you know she introduced us at that charity gala? She had his whole family background researched before she arranged for us to meet." I hadn't known, but I wasn't surprised. Eleanor Davis left nothing to chance, especially not her children's lives. "How is she?" I asked, not sure if I wanted to hear the answer. "Not good," Amber admitted. "Uncle Harold's stance has caused a major rift in the family. A lot of people have taken sides, and many aren't speaking to her. She's lost her position on 2 charity boards. Apparently some members were at the wedding and heard everything. And Thomas, still living at home. Still blaming everyone else for his problems." Amber sighed. "He and Mom enable each other's worst qualities. It's exhausting to be around them." We talked for hours, piecing together our separate experiences of the same childhood, filling in gaps in each other's understanding. I told her about my new life in Chicago, my growing confidence at work, the friends who accepted me without condition. She shared her struggles in therapy, her growing awareness of our mother's manipulation, her tentative steps toward independence. "James and I are in couples counseling now," she explained. "He's trying to understand how his behavior affected me. It's hard work, but I think we might make it." She paused. "I wouldn't have had the courage to insist on it if I hadn't seen you stand up for yourself at the wedding." As terrible as that moment was, it changed something for me. Before she left, Amber hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, words I'd never heard from any family member before. "And I hope someday we can be real sisters, not just people who grew up in the same house." 2 days after Amber's visit, my phone rang with my mother's number. I'd unblocked her months ago, confident enough in my boundaries to no longer need the technical barrier, but she rarely called directly anymore, usually communicating through my father when necessary. "Curious," I answered. "Morgan," she began, her voice carrying its usual blend of authority and martyrdom. "I understand Amber visited you." "She did," I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. "Well, I hope you didn't fill her head with more of your perspective on our family." She's going through a difficult time in her marriage, and she's very impressionable right now. The familiar pattern of dismissal and control triggered no emotional response in me now, just recognition. Mom, is there something specific you wanted to discuss? She paused, clearly thrown by my calm response. I thought perhaps it's time we put this unfortunate situation behind us. The family has been divided long enough. Your brother misses you, despite everything. And I'm willing to overlook what happened at the wedding. Overlook, I repeated. Not apologize for what you said? Not acknowledge the pain you caused? Just overlook it. Like it was a minor social faux pas and not a public declaration that my birth ruined your life. Morgan, you're being dramatic again. This is exactly what. No, I interrupted. Something I would never have done before. I'm not being dramatic. I'm stating facts. You said cruel, untrue things to me my entire life, culminating in that moment at the wedding. If you want a relationship with me now, it starts with acknowledging that reality. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of decades of unspoken truths. I did the best I could as a mother, she finally said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Maybe you did, I conceded. But your best hurt me deeply, consistently, for years. And until you can truly see that and take responsibility for it, we don't have anything more to discuss. I ended the call feeling oddly peaceful. For the first time, I had spoken my truth to my mother without anger, without desperate need for her approval, without fear of consequences. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd ever had. A week later, I received an email from Thomas. Unlike my mother, his message contained the first glimmer of self-awareness I'd ever seen from him. I've been doing some thinking, he wrote. When you left the wedding, I was angry because you disrupted the family narrative I depended on, that Mom was always right, that her criticism was justified, that you deserved it somehow. If that wasn't true, then what did it say about how I've behaved all these years? It's easier to keep believing you're the problem than to face my own complicity. I'm not ready to apologize yet, but I'm starting to ask questions I should have asked long ago. It wasn't an apology, but it was perhaps the beginning of one. I replied simply, "Thank you for sharing that, Thomas." Questioning is where healing begins. That spring, Rachel visited Chicago to celebrate what she called my freedom anniversary. We spent a weekend exploring the city, taking an architecture boat tour, eating deep dish pizza, and talking late into the night like we had in college. If someone had told you a year ago that your life would look like this, she asked as we watched the sunset from Navy Pier, would you have believed them? I considered the question, thinking about all I had lost and gained in 12 tumultuous months. No, I admitted. I couldn't have imagined this level of peace. I spent so many years trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely. I never realized I could just walk away and build something better. You know what I'm most proud of? Rachel said, linking her arm through mine. You didn't become bitter. You had every right to. But instead, you became more compassionate, more authentic. Her observation struck me as profoundly true. The experience that could have hardened me had instead softened the edges of my defenses, allowing me to connect more genuinely with others and myself. When Thanksgiving approached again, I received another formal invitation from my mother. This time, I didn't even consider attending. Instead, I hosted my own gathering in my Chicago apartment. Jessica and her boyfriend, David the photographer who had become something more than a friend, 2 colleagues from work, and Rachel who flew in specially for the occasion. As we sat around my table, sharing food and laughter, I realized I had created exactly what I'd always longed for, a circle of people who chose me, who saw me clearly and valued what they saw. The family I was born into had failed to provide the unconditional acceptance I needed, so I had built it for myself, person by person, connection by connection. The journey from that devastating moment at my sister's wedding to this peaceful Chicago evening had been neither straight nor easy. There had been days of doubt, nights of grief, Moments of rage at all the years I'd lost trying to earn approval that was never coming. But through it all, I had discovered an essential truth. Sometimes walking away is not an act of defeat, but of profound self-respect. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. That boundaries aren't selfish but necessary. That healing doesn't erase scars, but integrates them into a stronger whole. Most importantly, I had learned that family is defined not by blood but by behavior, by who shows up, who listens, who celebrates your joy and soothes your pain. As I looked around at the faces of my chosen family, I felt a gratitude so deep it brought tears to my eyes. The path that had led me here was painful, but I would walk it again to arrive at this place of authentic connection and self-acceptance. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice between your own well-being and family expectations, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what hurts us, especially when it comes wrapped in the package of family love. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve to be valued exactly as you are.